Can you actually avoid a toxic relationship? Does advice even help people? Is there any point to learning the signs? Or does everybody need to learn the hard way? This has been a topic that's come up lately. Someone said all the advice in the world doesn't matter and can't change anything because people have to learn themselves and learn the hard way and go through it. These are the lessons of life. And that might be true to an extent, but I think that there's a little more to it than that. You cannot always avoid a toxic relationship, but you can learn to walk away sooner and not stay drowning in one. Yes, you can have all the advice and protection in the world and still end up in a toxic relationship. And if you've ever stayed too long somewhere that wasn't good for you, or if you're currently experiencing something that is confusing, maybe it's not terrible, but it's not amazing, this is especially for you. Yes, you may not be able to avoid every toxic relationship, every heartbreak. I understand that. But what advice can do for you and what knowing the signs and knowing how and when to leave can do for you, it can plant a seed. It can help you when you're actually in it. You'll say, wait a minute, you'll be able to recognize it. The plan, I understand you cannot avoid it completely, but the plan is to be able to see what's happening, and you can shorten the pain and you can save yourself from what could become much worse. People do choose differently because of advice and because of what they've seen others go through. You learn to recognize the patterns and you say, this is not going to be me. And it can help give language to what you're experiencing. So when you do find yourself in a situation, you don't end up thinking you're crazy, you're the only one, or that this is just something normal that you have to deal with. You actually understand what is happening and why and when it may be time to leave. Think of the advice as a map. Having a map doesn't walk the path for you. It just shows you the way. It shows you the pitfalls, highlights shortcuts to get to where you need to be, and helps you understand where you're at when you're feeling lost. You still might go down the wrong path. You have free will to walk whichever path you want, but you can refer to the map to understand better. Maybe you do have to live it to learn it, but you don't have to live in it forever. Maybe you ignore the advice the first few times, but eventually you will get it and you'll fully understand it in an even deeper way. Maybe you had to learn something the hard way, but now you know you're not staying there again. You're not going to repeat it time and time again. Toxic dynamics can creep in anywhere, and people will try you, and those people are everywhere. And so you can't avoid every toxic person, but you can learn to leave sooner, to choose yourself, to walk away with your spirit still intact and with your whole life ahead of you, instead of just falling for it and getting sucked in so deep. Let me tell you a story about a girl. It might be you, and it might be someone you know, but it's a consistent story. Maybe she heard all of the warnings growing up, and she heard all the advice in the world and was so well protected and well loved. And she even would give this wonderful advice to her friends. But one day, of course, she meets someone, she falls in love, it feels so intense, it feels so passionate. She becomes addicted and craves their relationship. And she saw red flags. They were small, but she brushed it off. She told herself, it's not that bad. Nobody's perfect. And made it work. Over time, she slowly began to shrink her true self. Little compromises here and there, little self-betrayals, right? Nothing dramatic, just a little more silence, a little more time away from her own hobbies, a little more tolerance, a little more forgiveness, a little more shutting up, and it all seemed normal. Relationships require sacrifice, right? And everyone told her this is normal. But in the back of her mind, she had this seed and this message replaying over and over again. A relationship shouldn't make you lose yourself. And at some point, it finally clicked, and she said, well, that's exactly what I'm doing. So even though she stayed a little too long, the advice didn't fully prevent the experience, but it did help wake her up and snap her out of it and realize what she was wrapped up in. So why didn't she listen from the beginning? Why don't any of us, even when we know better and when we spot red flags? Because relationships are not logical, it's not black and white, it's emotional. And sometimes you will subconsciously choose what feels familiar to you and what feels like home. And sometimes there's still things that you may need to heal within yourself. And so you feel attracted to these things, to these mirrors that are going to show you things about yourself. And when people stay, it doesn't mean that they're dumb. It means that they are hopeful, they see potential, they feel something so real. They don't want to start over, they don't want to give up. Maybe they believe love is supposed to be hard and it's supposed to be a battlefield. They think it'll change. Maybe they're so invested not only in the person, but in this story that has been built around them and their intertwined lives. So be gentle with yourself if you stayed too long, or with your friends if they stayed too long. Most people stay until staying becomes more painful than leaving. It takes a lot of bravery to leave, even if something in the back of your mind knows that leaving would be best for you. It still takes a lot of bravery. And so advice, I feel, is still so important and matters, because it is not meant to block you from every lesson, but it's meant to help you and guide you, so that when you're wrapped up in it and you find yourself in the middle of a situation, you can look around and say, oh my goodness, this isn't love. I know what this is. I recognize this. And it will help you leave faster. For example, I, of course, have been in this situation and given chances. I think if I had not witnessed some things and people around me, I might have continued to give more chances. And just knowing what I knew and learning the patterns, I saw it one time, I saw it 2 times, and I said, no, this is not going to go on. This is not going to be me. And I was able to leave pretty quick. Like, most of my friends are impressed with like how I was able to just cut things off and never look back. And I didn't feel sad because I knew I was choosing me, and I knew there was something better, and I knew I was doing the right thing and what I needed to do, because I knew where the path would take me if I continued to stay and continue to shrink myself. So having this kind of knowledge will help you to stop repeating patterns, whether it's a pattern that you experience or even a generational pattern or just societal patterns. I feel like it's all patterns. And just protect yourself and protect yourself from further pain. Don't wait till it's too late. I mean, how many you see these crazy stories of women getting threatened or hurt by their partners, and it's like, you don't want to wait until it gets to that extreme. You don't want to wait until something is on the news. You protect yourself and leave before that point. And there comes, in everyone's situation, there comes a turning point where it's finally a quiet realization where you're like, I can't do this anymore. I need to choose me. Maybe you realize you're negotiating with yourself. You keep talking yourself into staying. You keep making excuses as to why you should stay. Maybe you're abandoning parts of yourself in order to keep the peace, and you're not being true to who you are. Maybe you feel like an inconvenience. Maybe you don't like who you're becoming and who you are in this dynamic. Usually at that point, all the advice that you may have once brushed off kind of becomes clear, and the seed blooms, and you start to say, oh my goodness, this is what 5 women in my life were talking about when they warned me. You always think like, oh, I can't relate to these old people, until one day you do. Until one day you kind of get it. So it all locks into place. Their advice doesn't block you from experiencing your own life, but it just all kind of clicks together. And then what you learn after you leave is so much. It doesn't always immediately feel empowering. It's like you go through some grief and confusion, of course, like adjusting to this new situation, but slowly the clarity comes and the relief and the freedom, and you feel strong and smart. It all takes time, but you'll get there. You are learning now what you don't want in order to get closer to what you do want and what is ideal for you. And then when you have that, you will appreciate it so much more. But you don't have to go through abuse. You don't have to be harmed. I understand heartbreak is normal, but there's certain points that I think we shouldn't be having to go through, And so the goal is not to just avoid any form of heartbreak and to never fall for the wrong person, but to just become the best version of you, become wiser, become more in love with yourself so that you can align with the right person. We don't have to judge each other for touching the fire, but if you do touch fire, you don't just leave your hand in it and stay burning. You go, and then you learn that it's hot, and then you don't do it again. You probably will date the wrong person, and that's okay. What really matters, it's that you don't stay in it. You can't always avoid toxic love, but you can avoid repeating it. You learn from it. You learn from many things. Part of it is your own experience, part of it is other advice. You take all these pieces, and they all come together and click together to help you live as your most empowered and radiant self.